Welcome to Dark Echoes, where the shadows come alive, and every story whispers a nightmare. If you're ready to face your deepest fears, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss what's lurking next. Like, share, and dive into the darkness with us, if you dare.
There's a town where no one leaves, yet no one truly stays. A town where the past lingers like a shadow, and the dead refuse to rest. Welcome to Ravenswood, where fear is not just a feeling, but a way of life. They say if you listen closely at night, you can hear them calling, those who vanished, those who should not be forgotten. A place where the air feels thicker, the nights stretch longer, and the silence carries secrets that refuse to stay buried. Ravenswood wasn't always like this. Decades ago, it was a quaint, unassuming town nestled at the edge of Blackthorn Forest, a place where neighbors exchanged smiles across white picket fences, and children rode their bikes through streets cracked with age. But over time, the smiles faded. The children grew quiet. Visitors noticed it first, the sensation of being watched from windows where no one stood. The faint sound of footsteps pacing behind them, only to find empty streets when they turned around. The records show a population of 2,146. It's been that number for years, untouched by births or deaths. Yet newcomers arrive every few months, travelers who took a wrong turn, drifters looking for a place to rest. They check into the Ravenswood Inn and are never seen leaving. The townspeople offer no explanations. When asked, they smile politely and change the subject. The town's history is filled with strange events. Families disappearing overnight, their homes left untouched as if they'd stepped out for a moment. Time here moves differently. Watches stop. Phones die. And the forest that surrounds Ravenswood seems to inch closer with each passing year, swallowing old paths and landmarks without a trace. There's a reason no map marks the road that leads here. A reason the locals avoid the old clock tower when it strikes midnight. And a reason why, if you ever find yourself passing through Ravenswood, you should never stop. Never stay the night. Because the town never forgets a visitor. And once it knows your name, it never lets you go. Ravenswood sits deep within the embrace of Blackthorn Forest, a town seemingly forgotten by time and untouched by the world beyond. No highways lead here, no directional signs point the way. The only road in is a narrow, cracked strip of asphalt, overtaken in places by creeping vines and lined with trees that lean in too close, as though whispering secrets to one another. The town itself is small, no more than a few dozen streets spiraling out from Ravenswood Square, where a rusted clock tower stands sentinel. Its hands have been frozen at 3:13 for decades. No one remembers when it last kept proper time, and no one dares to fix it. The buildings are weathered but intact, their facades untouched by the passage of years. The town hall, the Ravenswood Inn, the general store, they all appear preserved, as though locked in a photograph from the early 1900s. Historians trace the town's official founding to the mid-1800s, but local legends claim it's far older. Some say Ravenswood was never built, it simply appeared, carved from the mist and shadows. The earliest records are incomplete, entire pages mysteriously missing or altered. Census reports show the population has remained unchanged for over 50 years, 2,146 residents. Yet, oddly, the list of names doesn't match from one decade to the next. The strange occurrences began long before anyone started paying attention. In 1923, the Thompson family vanished without a trace. Their dining table was set for breakfast, eggs cold and untouched. The front door stood ajar, with no signs of struggle. Sheriff Michael Keaton led a search of the surrounding woods, but the family was never found. Their case became the first in a series of unexplained disappearances. Entire households gone overnight, leaving homes perfectly preserved. Then came the newcomers. Travelers who claimed they only stopped for gas or a night of rest, who never reappeared on any road beyond the Iron Bridge. Records show guests checking into the Ravenswood Inn but never checking out. Their rooms were left pristine, save for the faint scent of damp earth and a single, muddy footprint near the window. Perhaps the most unsettling mystery lies with the residents themselves. Photographs from the early 1900s show faces eerily similar to those seen today. Mrs. Eleanor Graves, the town's apothecary, has appeared unchanged in images spanning nearly a century. The barber, Daniel Lowe, has owned the same shop since 1947, and he looks exactly as he did when he first opened its doors. Time in Ravenswood doesn't move forward like it does elsewhere. Here, it circles, loops, and traps those who dare to linger too long. The town remains still, frozen in an eerie calm. And while visitors come and go in other places, here, they simply come, and stay. Ravenswood never grows, never shrinks. The population remains steady. And if you ask the locals why no one leaves, they'll tilt their heads, offer a polite smile, and give the same answer. Why would we leave? Ravenswood takes care of its own. But if you listen closely to their voices, you might detect the slightest tremble. And if you stay long enough to hear the clock tower strike midnight, you'll understand why. Because Ravenswood doesn't just take care of its own. It keeps them. Ravenswood's people are unlike any other. Their faces, their movements, even the way they speak. There's something unsettlingly consistent about them. Strangers who pass through notice it almost immediately. No one rushes. No one argues. Conversations feel rehearsed, as if following a script written long ago. At the heart of the town are the elders, a group of 5 who govern with quiet authority. They are neither elected nor appointed, no one can recall a time before them. Their names appear in town records dating back over a century, yet their faces remain unchanged. Mayor Henry Calloway, Eleanor Graves, Franklin Tate, Agnes Mercer, and Victor Hale. Their words are final, their presence unquestioned. They enact laws that make no sense anywhere else. Curfews enforced without explanation, certain roads forbidden after dark, names erased from public records as if those who bore them never existed. Then there are the Watchers. At night, shadows move behind drawn curtains, figures standing motionless by the windows of dimly lit houses. They do not speak. They do not move. But their eyes follow anyone who does. A drifter once claimed to have knocked on a door after dark, only to see every window in the street suddenly fill with faces. He left at dawn, but his story never did. It lingers like the cold in Ravenswood's air. And then there are the strangers who came and never left. Their names are still spoken in whispers, but their memories have faded, even to themselves. Tourists. Wayward souls. People looking for a fresh start, unaware that stepping into Ravenswood meant never truly stepping out again. Some forget where they came from. Others forget how to leave. And some, like the man who swore he had only been in town for a single night, are told by locals that he has lived there for years. When asked why no one leaves, the answer is always the same: no one leaves Ravenswood. Because no one ever wants to. But listen closely, and you might hear something else beneath the words. Something that sounds less like certainty, and more like resignation. The last time Ravenswood drew attention from the outside world was October 13, 1971, the night of the blood moon. It was a rare lunar event, but in Ravenswood, it became something else entirely. At exactly 11:57 p.m., the entire town gathered in silence at the square. No one spoke. No one moved. They simply stood beneath the deep red sky, their eyes fixed on the clock tower, its frozen hands unmoving at 3:13. Among them was James Holloway, a journalist from Chicago who had heard the rumors: vanishing families, eerie stillness, a town untouched by time. He had come looking for a story. What he found was something he was never meant to see. He set up his camera, documenting the silent gathering, the flickering streetlights, the unnatural stillness in the air. Then, the footage cuts to static. When the sheriff's deputy from the next county arrived days later, Holloway was gone. His motel room untouched. His car still parked by the curb. The only thing left behind was his camera, resting at the base of the clock tower. The tape inside played nothing but a distorted hum, punctuated by a single, chilling whisper: "She is ours now." That same night, a young girl named Elara Dawson disappeared from her home. Her parents woke the next morning to find her bed empty, her shoes still by the door, her breakfast plate untouched. No search party was formed. No missing posters were printed. No one spoke her name again. And when outsiders asked, the townspeople gave the same answer, their voices eerily calm. There was never an Elara Dawson. At the farthest edge of Ravenswood, just before the road vanishes into Blackthorn Forest, there stands a house. No one lives there. No one dares to. It's an old Victorian, its paint long faded, its windows clouded with dust. The porch sags under the weight of years, yet the front door is always unlocked. The locals never mention it, and when pressed, they turn tight-lipped, their eyes drifting toward the clock tower, as if waiting for permission to speak. Rumors whisper that the house belonged to Ravenswood's first family, but no records exist. The deed has no name. Census logs skip over its address. And yet, it remains, untouched, undisturbed, as if waiting for someone to return. Inside, everything is preserved. The furniture sits in place, covered in a fine layer of dust. A dining table remains set for four, plates filled with meals long rotted away. A child's rocking horse rests mid-motion, as if it had only just been abandoned. And the most unsettling thing, the candles on the mantel. No matter when someone enters, they are always flickering. Wax melted down to the same level, as though time inside this house has never moved forward. Few have dared to step inside, and even fewer have spoken about what they saw. But those who did all recall the same thing. A presence. Not seen. Not heard. But felt. And the overwhelming, unshakable certainty that whoever once lived there never really left. Detective Elliot Grayson arrived in Ravenswood on November 2, 1989, investigating a string of missing persons cases, travelers who had vanished without a trace. The locals were polite but distant. They answered his questions with practiced smiles, their voices careful, rehearsed. No one denied the disappearances. No one acknowledged them either. As he prepared to leave, a woman at the general store whispered a warning: "Leave before sundown." No one should be awake in Ravenswood after dark. He didn't listen. That night, the air grew heavy, thick with mist rolling in from the forest. From his motel window, he saw them, figures standing in the fog, unmoving, watching. The clock tower struck 3:13, though the hands never moved. The next morning, his car was gone. His motel key no longer fit the door. The files he had brought, his notes, his case documents, were missing. He stormed into the sheriff's office, demanding answers. The sheriff stared at him, blank-faced. "Sir, we don't have a Detective Grayson here." And we never did. Outside, the townspeople watched. Silent. Expressionless. And as he stood there, heart pounding, he realized something far worse. He couldn't remember his own address. His badge number. The name of the city he had come from. He was already part of Ravenswood. Ravenswood is not haunted. It is alive. It does not simply claim lives, it erases them. Time here does not move forward, nor does it stand still. It bends, loops, and devours. Every missing person, every vanishing traveler, every hollow-eyed resident staring from behind lace curtains, they are not dead. They are absorbed. The town rewrites its own history. It shifts memories, alters records, removes names. Those who enter never truly leave because once Ravenswood knows you, it will not forget. The clock tower, frozen at 3:13, is the only clue. A marker of when time fractured, when Ravenswood became something more than a town. It does not kill. It simply takes, piece by piece, moment by moment, until nothing remains but the whisper of a name that no one remembers speaking. And once Ravenswood has you, it never lets go. Few have tried to leave Ravenswood. None have succeeded. One man, Daniel Whitaker, came closer than anyone before. He packed his bags, stole a car, and drove until the town was nothing but a distant blur in his rearview mirror. He made it 200 miles before stopping at a roadside motel, exhausted but victorious. But when he awoke the next morning, he was home. His suitcase sat untouched by the door. His shoes were still wet from Ravenswood's morning dew. The town's clock tower loomed outside his window, its frozen hands stuck at 3:13. On his bedside table, he left a single note before vanishing for good. You think you're free, but the moment you remember Ravenswood, you're already back. Ravenswood remains untouched, unchanged. The streets are quiet, the clock tower frozen at 3:13. A hollow wind drifts through the square, carrying whispers of names long erased. In the distance, the town bell rings. Through the fog, a lone figure appears, a new arrival. Confused. Unaware. Another lost soul stepping into a place that has been waiting for them all along. As the mist thickens, the final words settle like a breath on the wind, and so it continues. Another name forgotten. Another soul lost to Ravenswood.